Marcus had served as a royal guard for 15 years, walking the same marble corridors of Blackwood Palace every single day. His boots echoed against the polished floors as he made his evening rounds, checking locks and ensuring the royal family's safety. At 42 years old, he had seen 3 different kings rule from these walls, but nothing had ever prepared him for what would happen on this ordinary Tuesday evening. The palace felt different tonight. King Edward had passed away just 3 days ago, and the entire building seemed to hold its breath in mourning. Queen Isabella had locked herself in her chambers, refusing to see anyone except her personal maid. The staff whispered in hushed tones about the upcoming funeral arrangements and what would happen to the kingdom now that their beloved ruler was gone. Marcus checked his pocket watch as he approached the east wing. It was nearly midnight and most of the palace had settled into an uneasy quiet. The new king, Prince William, would be crowned next week, but for now everything felt suspended in time. As head of the night security team, Marcus took his responsibilities seriously. He had sworn an oath to protect this family, and he would honor that promise until his last breath. As he turned the corner toward the royal study, something caught his eye. A thin beam of light was coming from underneath the heavy oak door. This was strange because no one was supposed to be in that room. The study had been King Edward's private sanctuary, and since his death it had remained locked and untouched. Marcus felt his heart rate increase as he quietly approached the door. He pressed his ear against the wood and heard the faint sound of papers rustling inside. Someone was definitely in there, but who could it be? The Queen was in her chambers. Prince William was staying at his estate until the coronation, and all the staff had been accounted for during the evening roll call. Marcus reached for his radio to call for backup, but something made him hesitate. What if it was Queen Isabella, looking for something that belonged to her late husband? Deciding to investigate alone first, Marcus gently tried the door handle. To his surprise, it turned easily. The door had been unlocked, which was impossible because he had personally checked all the locks in this wing just 2 hours ago. As he slowly pushed the door open, the hinges creaked softly and he stepped into the dimly lit study. The room looked exactly as King Edward had left it. Books lined the walls from floor to ceiling, and the massive wooden desk sat in the center, covered with important documents and personal items. But there was no one inside. The light was coming from a small desk lamp that had been turned on, casting strange shadows across the room. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine as he realized that someone had been here very recently. He began to search the room carefully, looking for any signs of what the intruder might have been after. The desk drawers were slightly open and some papers had been moved around. As he examined the scene more closely, Marcus noticed something peculiar about the bookshelf behind the desk. Several books had been pulled out slightly, as if someone had been searching behind them. Marcus had been in this study countless times over the years, accompanying King Edward during late-night meetings and security briefings. He knew every inch of this room, and something was definitely not right. The pattern of books that had been disturbed seemed almost deliberate, like they were pointing to something specific. His curiosity getting the better of him, Marcus decided to investigate further. As he approached the bookshelf, he noticed that the books that had been moved all had something in common. They were all about the history of the Blackwood royal family, dating back over 300 years. King Edward had been passionate about genealogy and had spent countless hours researching his ancestors. But why would someone be interested in these particular books now, just days after the king's death? Marcus carefully examined the shelf and noticed that behind where the books had been removed, there were small scratches in the wood. They looked fresh, as if someone had been trying to find something hidden behind the bookshelf. His training as a guard had taught him to notice details that others might miss, and these scratches definitely hadn't been there during his last visit to the study. Following his instincts, Marcus began to press against different sections of the bookshelf, looking for any hidden mechanisms. The Blackwood Palace was famous for its secret passages and hidden rooms, built during times of war to protect the royal family from enemies. Many of these secret spaces had been forgotten over the centuries, but Marcus had always suspected that King Edward knew more about them than he let on. After several minutes of searching, Marcus felt something give way under his fingers. A small section of the bookshelf clicked inward, revealing a hidden panel that had been perfectly disguised as part of the wooden structure. His heart pounded with excitement and fear as he realized he had discovered something that had been kept secret for who knows how long. Whatever lay behind this panel, someone else had been looking for it tonight, and Marcus was about to uncover a mystery that would change everything he thought he knew about the royal family he had sworn to protect. Marcus stared at the hidden panel, his hands trembling slightly as he processed what he had discovered. The opening was about the size of a small window, perfectly carved into the bookshelf and hidden so well that it had remained undetected for years. Cool air flowed from the dark space beyond, carrying with it the musty smell of old stone and something else he couldn't quite identify. Taking a deep breath, Marcus pulled out his flashlight and shined it into the opening. What he saw made his jaw drop. Behind the bookshelf was a narrow corridor that seemed to stretch deep into the walls of the palace. The stones were old and covered with a thin layer of dust, but there were fresh footprints in the dirt on the floor. Someone had definitely been here recently, and they had gone deeper into this hidden passage. Marcus knew he should report this discovery immediately, but something held him back. If there really was an intruder in the palace using secret passages, they could be anywhere by now. The royal family could be in danger, and every second counted. Besides, his duty was to protect the palace, and that meant investigating any potential threats personally. He squeezed through the opening, grateful for his lean build that allowed him to fit through the narrow space. The corridor was barely wide enough for one person, and the ceiling was so low that he had to duck his head as he moved forward. The beam of his flashlight cut through the darkness, revealing ancient stone walls that had probably been built centuries ago. As he followed the footprints deeper into the passage, Marcus tried to remember everything he knew about the palace's layout. This corridor seemed to be running parallel to the main hallway, which meant it could connect to other parts of the building. The thought that someone could move through the palace unseen using these hidden passages made him feel sick with worry. After walking for what felt like forever but was probably only 5 minutes, Marcus came to a fork in the passage. The footprints continued to the right, but there was also a ladder leading downward to the left. The metal rungs looked much newer than the ancient stones around them, suggesting that this part of the passage had been modified more recently. Marcus decided to follow the footprints first, knowing that catching the intruder was his immediate priority. The right passage began to slope downward, and Marcus could feel the temperature dropping as he descended. The walls here were different too, made of brick instead of stone, and they seemed to be in better condition. Someone had been maintaining this part of the secret network, keeping it clean and functional. But who had access to these passages, and why had they been kept secret from the security team? As he rounded a corner, Marcus saw a faint light ahead. He immediately turned off his flashlight and pressed himself against the wall, moving as quietly as possible toward the source of the illumination. His heart was beating so loudly that he was sure whoever was ahead would be able to hear it, but he forced himself to stay calm and focused. The light was coming from what appeared to be a small underground chamber. As Marcus crept closer, he could hear the sound of someone moving around inside, along with what sounded like papers being shuffled. He positioned himself at the entrance to the chamber and carefully peered around the corner. What he saw shocked him more than anything he could have imagined. The chamber was filled with filing cabinets, old wooden chests, and shelves lined with documents and books. It looked like a secret archive that had been hidden beneath the palace for years. But what made Marcus's blood run cold was the person standing in the middle of the room, going through a stack of papers with intense concentration. It was Lord Harrison, the king's most trusted advisor and the man who had been like a father to Prince William. Marcus had known Lord Harrison for over a decade, and he had always seemed like the most loyal and honorable person in the entire court. But here he was in the middle of the night, searching through what appeared to be secret documents hidden beneath the palace. Lord Harrison looked older than Marcus remembered, his gray hair disheveled and his usually perfect clothes wrinkled and dirty. There was something desperate about the way he was going through the papers, as if he was looking for something specific and running out of time to find it. Marcus watched in stunned silence as the man he had respected for years continued his frantic search. Finally, Lord Harrison seemed to find what he was looking for. He pulled out a thick envelope from one of the wooden chests and held it up to the light, examining it carefully. Even from his hiding spot, Marcus could see that the envelope was sealed with red wax, and there appeared to be some kind of official stamp or seal on it. Lord Harrison's face showed relief mixed with what looked like fear as he stared at the document. Marcus knew he had to make a decision. He could confront Lord Harrison now and demand to know what was going on, or he could wait and see what the advisor planned to do with whatever he had found. But as he watched, Lord Harrison began putting other documents into a bag, clearly planning to take them with him. This wasn't just about one envelope. There was something much bigger happening here. Just as Marcus was about to step into the chamber and reveal himself, Lord Harrison turned toward the entrance. For a terrifying moment, Marcus thought he had been spotted, but the advisor was just checking to make sure he was still alone. In that brief moment when the light fell on Lord Harrison's face, Marcus saw something that made his blood run cold. The man he had trusted and respected was crying. Tears were streaming down Lord Harrison's weathered cheeks as he clutched the envelope to his chest. Whatever secret he had discovered in this hidden archive, it was devastating enough to bring one of the strongest men in the kingdom to tears. Marcus realized that he was witnessing something that would change not just his own life, but possibly the entire future of the royal family. Marcus remained frozen in the shadows, watching as Lord Harrison wiped the tears from his face and carefully placed the envelope inside his coat pocket. The advisor then began methodically going through the other documents in the chamber, occasionally pulling out papers and adding them to his collection. It was clear that he knew exactly what he was looking for, as if he had been here many times before. The weight of what Marcus was witnessing began to sink in. Lord Harrison had access to secret passages that even the head of security didn't know about. He knew about this hidden archive filled with what appeared to be royal documents and records. Most importantly, he was taking these documents just days after King Edward's death, which suggested that whatever secrets they contained were urgent and time-sensitive. Marcus watched as Lord Harrison moved to a particular filing cabinet in the corner of the chamber. The advisor pulled out a key from his pocket and unlocked one of the drawers, revealing rows of organized files. He selected several folders and quickly flipped through them, his expression growing more troubled with each page he read. Whatever information was contained in these files, it was clearly devastating. As Lord Harrison continued his search, Marcus noticed something else that made his stomach turn. On a small table near the back of the chamber, there were several photographs spread out. Even from his distance, Marcus could see that they showed members of the royal family, but they appeared to be old pictures that he had never seen before. One photograph in particular caught his attention because it seemed to show King Edward as a young man, but he was standing next to people that Marcus didn't recognize. Lord Harrison picked up the photographs and studied them carefully, comparing them to some of the documents he had already collected. His hands were shaking as he examined each image, and Marcus could see the advisor's lips moving as if he was reading something written on the back of the pictures. The expression on Lord Harrison's face was a mixture of sadness, anger, and what looked like fear. Suddenly, Lord Harrison stopped what he was doing and looked directly toward the entrance where Marcus was hiding. For a heart-stopping moment, Marcus thought he had been discovered, but the advisor was just listening for any sounds that might indicate someone else was in the passages. After a few tense seconds, Lord Harrison seemed satisfied that he was still alone and returned to his work. Marcus realized that he needed to see what was in those documents and photographs. Whatever Lord Harrison had discovered, it was important enough to risk everything for, and as head of security, Marcus had a responsibility to know about any threats to the royal family. But he also knew that confronting Lord Harrison directly might not give him the answers he needed. The advisor clearly had his own agenda, and he might not be willing to share the truth. As Marcus watched, Lord Harrison began packing up his findings into a leather briefcase. The advisor worked quickly but carefully, making sure that everything was properly organized and secured. He then took one last look around the chamber, as if memorizing its contents, before heading toward the entrance where Marcus was hiding. Panic shot through Marcus as he realized that Lord Harrison was about to discover him. There was nowhere to hide in the narrow passage, and the advisor would have to pass right by him to get back to the main part of the palace. Marcus pressed himself as flat as possible against the stone wall and held his breath, hoping that somehow Lord Harrison wouldn't notice him in the darkness. The advisor emerged from the chamber carrying his briefcase and began walking down the passage toward Marcus's hiding spot. Marcus could hear the man's footsteps getting closer and closer, and he prepared himself for the confrontation that was about to happen. But just as Lord Harrison was about to reach him, something unexpected occurred. A loud crash echoed through the passages from somewhere deeper in the tunnel system. Lord Harrison immediately stopped walking and turned toward the sound, his face showing alarm and confusion. Marcus realized that someone else was in the secret passages, and whoever it was had just made their presence known in a very dramatic way. Lord Harrison quickly turned off his flashlight and pressed himself against the wall, just as Marcus had been doing. Both men stood in complete darkness, listening for any other sounds that might indicate who else was moving through the hidden corridors beneath the palace. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat thundering in his ears as he tried to figure out what was happening. After several minutes of tense silence, they heard the sound of footsteps moving quickly through the passages, but they seemed to be going in the opposite direction from where Marcus and Lord Harrison were located. Lord Harrison waited a few more minutes before turning his flashlight back on and continuing toward the exit, but his movements were now much more cautious and deliberate. Marcus followed at a safe distance as Lord Harrison made his way back through the secret passages toward the royal study. The advisor seemed to know the route by heart, navigating the twists and turns without hesitation. As they got closer to the bookshelf entrance, Marcus could see that Lord Harrison was checking his pocket watch frequently, as if he was working against some kind of deadline. When they reached the hidden panel behind the bookshelf, Lord Harrison paused and listened carefully before stepping through into the study. Marcus waited in the passage for several minutes, giving the advisor time to leave the room before making his own exit. When he finally climbed back through the opening, he found the study empty and dark, with no sign that anyone had ever been there. But as Marcus stood in the familiar room, trying to process everything he had witnessed, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. On the desk where King Edward used to work, there was a single piece of paper that hadn't been there before. Marcus approached the desk and saw that it was a handwritten note, and as he read the words written in Lord Harrison's distinctive handwriting, he realized that his discovery in the secret passages was just the beginning of a much larger and more dangerous mystery. Marcus picked up the note with trembling hands, his eyes straining to read Lord Harrison's handwriting in the dim light of the study. The message was brief but chilling. The truth about William must never be revealed. The documents are safe, but there are others who know. We have 3 days before the coronation. God help us all. The note was signed with Lord Harrison's initials and dated with today's date. The implications of what Marcus was reading hit him like a physical blow. There was some kind of secret about Prince William that was so dangerous it could apparently threaten the entire monarchy. Lord Harrison, who had been like a father to the prince, was clearly trying to protect him by hiding evidence of whatever this truth was. But the note suggested that other people knew about it too, and they might not be as loyal as Lord Harrison. Marcus carefully folded the note and put it in his pocket, his mind racing with questions. What could Prince William have done that would be so terrible? And who were these other people who knew about it? The coronation was indeed in 3 days, and if someone planned to reveal damaging information about the future king, they would probably do it before he could officially take the throne. As Marcus stood in the study trying to make sense of everything, he heard footsteps in the hallway outside. He quickly turned off the desk lamp and moved to the window, pretending to be checking the security of the room. The door opened, and Queen Isabella entered wearing a black mourning dress and looking exhausted. "Marcus," she said softly, clearly surprised to find him there. "I couldn't sleep. I came to sit in Edward's study for a while. It makes me feel closer to him." Her voice was thick with grief, and Marcus could see that she had been crying. "Of course, Your Majesty," Marcus replied, bowing respectfully. "I was just completing my security rounds. Should I leave you alone?" Queen Isabella shook her head and moved to her late husband's chair behind the desk. "Stay, please. I don't like being alone right now." She sat down heavily and looked around the room with sad eyes. "Edward spent so much time in here. Sometimes I think he loved this room more than anywhere else in the palace." Marcus watched as the Queen's gaze fell on the area where he had just discovered the hidden panel. For a moment he wondered if she knew about the secret passages, but her expression showed no recognition. She seemed genuinely unaware of the hidden chamber and archive that lay just behind the bookshelf. "Your Majesty," Marcus said carefully, In the days leading up to his death, did King Edward seem worried about anything? Anything unusual or concerning? Queen Isabella looked up at him with interest. That's a strange question, Marcus. Why do you ask? Marcus knew he had to be careful about how much he revealed. Just routine security concerns, Your Majesty. I want to make sure that nothing was troubling the king that might affect the safety of the royal family. The queen was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Edward was very concerned about William lately. He kept saying that there were things about the family, history that William needed to know before he became king, but he never got the chance to tell him. Marcus felt his heart rate increase. What kind of things, Your Majesty? I don't know, Queen Isabella replied, shaking her head sadly. Edward said it was better if I didn't know the details. He said some secrets were too dangerous for anyone except the king to carry. She looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. I'm worried about William. He's going to be king in 3 days, and I don't think he's prepared for whatever burden Edward was carrying. Before Marcus could respond, there was a soft knock on the study door. Lord Harrison entered the room, looking composed despite everything Marcus had witnessed in the secret chamber. Your Majesty, he said, bowing to the Queen. I saw the light and wanted to make sure you were all right. I'm fine, Harrison, Queen Isabella replied. Just having trouble sleeping. Marcus was keeping me company. Lord Harrison's eyes met Marcus's for a brief moment, and Marcus thought he saw a flash of something, fear, perhaps, or warning. But the advisor's expression quickly returned to its usual calm demeanor. Your Majesty, Lord Harrison said, perhaps you should try to get some rest. Tomorrow will be a difficult day with all the funeral preparations. Queen Isabella nodded and stood up from the desk. You're right, of course. Good night, Harrison. Good night, Marcus. She left the room, her footsteps fading down the hallway. For a moment, Marcus and Lord Harrison were alone in the study, and the tension between them was almost unbearable. Marcus knew that Lord Harrison was aware he had left the note on the desk, and the advisor had to know that someone had discovered his activities in the secret passages. Marcus, Lord Harrison said finally, his voice carefully controlled. I trust that everything you've seen and heard tonight will remain confidential. The security of the royal family depends on discretion from people like you. Of course, Lord Harrison, Marcus replied, trying to keep his own voice steady. But I have to ask, is there something I should know about? Something that might affect my ability to protect the royal family? Lord Harrison was quiet for a long moment, studying Marcus's face carefully. There are some things, Marcus, that are better left buried. Some secrets that would cause more harm than good if they were revealed. I hope you understand that sometimes protecting people means protecting them from the truth. Marcus nodded, but inside, he was more determined than ever to find out what Lord Harrison was hiding. As the advisor left the study, Marcus remained behind, staring at the bookshelf that concealed so many secrets. He knew that he would have to return to that hidden chamber and discover for himself what documents were so dangerous that they could threaten the entire monarchy. But first he needed to find out who else was in those secret passages tonight, and what they were planning to do with whatever they knew about Prince William. The coronation was in 3 days, and Marcus had a feeling that time was running out for everyone involved. The next morning, Marcus could barely concentrate on his regular duties. Every time he saw Lord Harrison in the palace corridors, he felt a mixture of suspicion and curiosity that was impossible to ignore. The advisor acted completely normal, discussing funeral arrangements with the staff and meeting with various dignitaries who had come to pay their respects to the late king. But Marcus knew the truth about what Lord Harrison had been doing in the secret chambers. During his lunch break, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He returned to the royal study, making sure that no one was around to see him. The palace was busy with preparations for both the funeral and the upcoming coronation, which gave him the perfect opportunity to investigate further without being noticed. Marcus quickly moved the books on the shelf and activated the hidden panel, slipping into the secret passage once again. This time, he was better prepared with a more powerful flashlight and had memorized the route to the underground chamber. As he made his way through the narrow corridors, he noticed details that he had missed the night before in his excitement and fear. The passages were definitely old, but they had been maintained recently. There were modern electrical wires running along some of the walls, suggesting that someone had installed lighting at some point. There were also small air vents that kept the passages from becoming too stuffy, indicating that they were still being used regularly by someone who cared about keeping them functional. When Marcus reached the underground chamber, he was amazed by what he could see in the full light of his powerful flashlight. The room was much larger than he had realized, and it was filled with hundreds of documents, books, and artifacts that appeared to span several centuries of royal history. Filing cabinets lined the walls, and there were several old wooden chests that looked like they contained extremely valuable items. Marcus began systematically going through the filing cabinets, looking for any clues about what Lord Harrison had been so desperate to find. Most of the documents were written in old-fashioned language that was difficult to understand, but he could tell they were official royal records, including birth certificates, marriage licenses, and what appeared to be adoption papers. It was in the third filing cabinet that Marcus found something that made his hands shake with shock. There was a folder labeled Prince William, Confidential, that contained documents he never could have imagined. Inside were medical records, DNA test results, and a birth certificate that told a story completely different from what the public knew about the future king. According to the documents Marcus was reading, Prince William was not actually King Edward's biological son. The DNA test results clearly showed that there was no genetic relationship between the late king and the prince, but even more shocking was the real birth certificate, which showed that William's biological father was a man named Thomas Mitchell, who had been a palace gardener over 30 years ago. The medical records revealed that Queen Isabella had been unable to conceive children naturally, and that she and King Edward had made the decision to use a sperm donor to have a child. They had chosen Thomas Mitchell because he bore a physical resemblance to King Edward, and they had sworn him to secrecy about his role in William's conception. According to the documents, Thomas had been paid a large sum of money and had left the country shortly after William's birth. Marcus sat in the underground chamber, staring at the papers that revealed the truth about the royal family. Prince William had no idea that he was not actually royal blood, and his entire claim to the throne was based on a lie that had been carefully maintained for over 30 years. This was the secret that King Edward had been carrying, and the burden that he had wanted to share with William before his death. But as Marcus continued reading, he discovered something even more troubling. There was a recent letter in the file, dated just 2 weeks before King Edward's death. It was from someone who signed their name as TM, and it demanded a meeting with the king. The letter writer claimed to have evidence that would expose the truth about William's parentage, and they were threatening to go public unless they received a substantial payment. Marcus realized that Thomas Mitchell, William's biological father, had returned after all these years and was trying to blackmail the royal family. This explained Lord Harrison's desperate search through the documents and his fear about the upcoming coronation. If Thomas Mitchell revealed the truth about William's parentage, it would not only destroy the prince's claim to the throne, but it would also create a constitutional crisis that could threaten the entire monarchy. As Marcus put the documents back in their proper place, he heard a sound that made his blood run cold. Someone was coming down the passage toward the chamber, and they were moving quickly. Marcus quickly turned off his flashlight and hid behind one of the filing cabinets, hoping that whoever was approaching wouldn't notice that someone had been going through the documents. The footsteps got closer and closer, and Marcus could see the beam of a flashlight approaching the entrance to the chamber. When the person entered the room, Marcus was shocked to see that it was Prince William himself. The future king looked haggard and desperate, as if he hadn't slept in days. He was carrying a large bag and appeared to be looking for something specific. Marcus watched from his hiding place as Prince William went directly to the filing cabinet that contained the documents about his parentage. The prince pulled out the folder that Marcus had just been reading and opened it with shaking hands. As William read through the papers, his face went through a range of emotions: shock, anger, sadness, and finally, a kind of resigned determination. So it's true, Prince William whispered to himself as he stared at the DNA test results. I'm not really a prince at all. I'm just the son of a gardener who happened to donate sperm to the queen. His voice was bitter and filled with pain as he spoke the words that shattered his entire understanding. of who he was, Marcus realized that somehow, Prince William had already learned about his true parentage. Someone had told him the truth, probably the same person who had been blackmailing King Edward. But if William knew the truth, what was he planning to do about it? The coronation was tomorrow, and the entire kingdom was expecting him to become their new king. As Marcus watched, Prince William began taking documents out of his bag and placing them in the filing cabinet. But these weren't the same papers that had been there before. These were new documents that William had brought with him. Marcus couldn't see exactly what they were, but it was clear that the prince was trying to replace the evidence of his true parentage with something else. Marcus remained hidden as Prince William finished replacing the documents in the filing cabinet. The future king's hands were steady now, as if he had made peace with whatever decision he was implementing. When William turned to leave the chamber, Marcus could see that his face had changed. The confusion and pain from earlier had been replaced by a calm resolve that was somehow more frightening than his previous distress. After Prince William left the chamber, Marcus waited several minutes before emerging from his hiding place. He immediately went to the filing cabinet to see what the prince had done. What he found shocked him even more than the original documents. William had replaced all the evidence of his true parentage with forged papers that supported his claim to the throne. The new birth certificate showed King Edward as his biological father, and the DNA test results had been altered to show a genetic match. But Marcus noticed something that Prince William had apparently missed. One of the original documents had fallen behind the filing cabinet during the switch, and Marcus was able to retrieve it. It was a letter from Thomas Mitchell to King Edward, and it revealed the final piece of the puzzle that explained everything that had been happening over the past few days. According to the letter, Thomas Mitchell had indeed returned to England and had been demanding money in exchange for keeping quiet about William's parentage. But King Edward had refused to pay, believing that the truth should be revealed regardless of the consequences. The king had planned to tell William about his real parentage and then abdicate the throne, allowing the kingdom to choose a new royal family or transition to a different form of government. Thomas Mitchell had been enraged by King Edward's refusal to pay, and he had threatened to expose the truth in the most damaging way possible during the coronation ceremony. He planned to interrupt the proceedings and reveal William's true parentage in front of the entire world, creating maximum humiliation for the royal family and chaos for the kingdom. Marcus realized that King Edward's sudden death might not have been as natural as everyone believed. The timing was too convenient, coming just days before Thomas Mitchell planned to expose the truth. If someone had wanted to prevent the king from revealing William's parentage and abdicating, they would have had strong motivation to ensure that Edward died before he could act on his plans. As Marcus made his way back through the secret passages toward the royal study, his mind was racing with the implications of what he had discovered. Prince William knew about his true parentage and was trying to cover it up with forged documents. Thomas Mitchell was still planning to expose the truth during tomorrow's coronation, and someone in the palace might have murdered King Edward to prevent him from voluntarily revealing the secret that would destroy the monarchy. When Marcus emerged from the hidden panel back into the study, he found Lord Harrison waiting for him. The advisor was sitting in King Edward's chair, and his expression was grave but not surprised. It was clear that he had known Marcus would return to investigate further. "I see you've discovered the truth," Lord Harrison said quietly. "The question now is what you plan to do with that knowledge." Marcus closed the hidden panel and turned to face the man who had been like a father to Prince William. "Did you kill King Edward?" he asked directly, knowing that there was no point in pretending anymore. Lord Harrison was quiet for a long moment before answering. "Edward was dying anyway, Marcus. He had been diagnosed with a rare heart condition months ago, but he had kept it secret from everyone except me and his personal physician. The stress of deciding what to do about William's parentage was killing him faster than the disease." "That's not what I asked," Marcus replied firmly. "Did you kill him?" "I gave him medicine that I knew would accelerate his heart failure," Lord Harrison admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. He was in agony about the decision he had to make. He loved William like a son, but he also believed in the truth and the integrity of the monarchy. "I couldn't let him destroy the boy's life and the kingdom's stability for the sake of honesty about something that happened 30 years ago. Marcus, felt sick as he realized the full scope of what had been happening. And now William is trying to cover up the truth with forged documents, while Thomas Mitchell is still planning to expose everything tomorrow. Lord Harrison nodded sadly. William found out about his parentage from Thomas Mitchell himself. The man contacted him directly when King Edward refused to pay. William is trying to protect himself and the monarchy the only way he knows how, but it won't work. Thomas has copies of all the original documents, and he's determined to reveal the truth during the coronation. So what happens now? Marcus asked, though he was afraid to hear the answer. Lord Harrison stood up from the desk and walked to the window, looking out at the palace grounds where preparations for tomorrow's coronation were in full swing. Tomorrow, Thomas Mitchell will interrupt the ceremony and reveal that our future king is not actually royal blood. The monarchy will be destroyed, the kingdom will be thrown into chaos, and William's life will be ruined unless... Unless what? Marcus asked, though he suspected he already knew where this conversation was heading. Unless Thomas Mitchell doesn't make it to the coronation, Lord Harrison said simply. I've already killed one person to protect this family, Marcus. I won't hesitate to kill another. Marcus felt the weight of the decision that was now in front of him. He could report everything he had learned to the authorities and let the truth come out, which would destroy Prince William and the monarchy. He could help Lord Harrison stop Thomas Mitchell, which would make him an accomplice to murder. Or he could try to find a third option that would protect everyone involved. As he stood in the study where this whole mystery had begun, Marcus realized that sometimes being a protector meant making choices that had no right answers. Whatever he decided to do, lives would be destroyed and the future of the kingdom would be changed forever. The secret he had discovered in the hidden chamber had indeed changed everything, just as he had feared it would.